Peter Pham is the director of the Africa Center at the Atlantic Council. I began by asking him about the role of the United Nations in this crisis.
It's last year, the United Nations Security Council endorsed under Chapter 7 authorities a regional protection force to protect people in South Sudan. And that deployment of that force has been obstructed time and again by the Salva Kiir regime. Now we hear that they're going to allow access. Well, the proof is going to be in the pudding, whether they actually allow it. Just remember, in South Sudan right now, we have 1.8 million people out of 12.5 million who are displaced internally, more than 1.5 million refugees in neighboring countries. So a fifth, at least, of the population are away from their homes. So yes, while meteorological conditions, while climate change may have exacerbated this famine or brought about the drought, let's be honest, the famine itself was exacerbated by conflict, and the conflict was made by the government in power back in 2013.
Let's switch and talk about the United States. When I was doing my research, these are the numbers that I found. The U.S. gave more than $300 million to South Sudan in 2016, most of it in humanitarian assistance. Peter, where is this money going, and why does it not seem to be making a difference? Does it come back again to the government of South Sudan and security issues?
Well, several things. A lot of the money is going simply to keep people alive, and that's very important. Because right now, we're, as the numbers you cite, the fact that 100,000 right now, mainly children in 2 counties in Unity State, are in danger of starving right now. By July, which is the lean season in South Sudan, 5.5 million are going to be severely food. So we have to get food to people who are starving, first and foremost. But that's not sustainable in the long term. This long term requires a solution of the profound political crisis in this country, and that requires leadership on the part of the failed leaders of this country.
So what is the role of the African Union in this crisis? Do they have a role? And then I want to get to the Trump administration and what kind of priority is this going to be from the Trump administration? Well,
first let's start with the African Union. The African Union certainly has done some things. The investigation of how the Civil War got started, who is responsible for grave humanitarian violations, human rights abuses, it's quite clear. The report by former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo points the finger primarily at the government. Now the African Union needs to have the political will to act upon those conclusions. As for the United States, we have to look at this. Certainly, the American people are extraordinarily generous, as Daniel has reported, when faced with humanitarian tragedies like this. But over the long term, we can't keep this sustainably over the long term. We've got to find a way to break out of the vicious cycle. And if that requires looking at the nature of the regime that, let's be honest, the U.S. during the Obama administration helped put in and maintain in power, then we have to go and have the courage to relook at some of those presuppositions.
And that was Peter Pham from the Africa Center